familiar with. But I think we can still learn something from it. And again, it's not necessarily about Jesus is always ahead of us. Don't ever think that God is sitting way up high somewhere in the heavens, clueless to our lives or our concerns or what's going on. He actually always is a step ahead. This is never clearer than we see right here in the fourth sign. Jesus already knew what He was going to do, didn't He? It literally says that here in the Scriptures. It says that Jesus already knew what was going on. He knew the people's needs. He knew the people that were coming. He knew how many there were. He didn't need to have them counted up. He saw them coming. He knew they would be coming. Even before He had sat down on the mountainside with His disciples, He knew what was going to happen. And so He knew what was going on. He knew the people, but He also knew Philip's concerns. You ever wonder why He asked Philip? Well, if you do a little research, Philip was from that area. He lived about 9 miles away from where they were. So Philip would have been the one to ask, hey, where's the best place we can go buy some bread? Where's a store around here we can buy some bread? And it's almost kind of like a joke, you know? Because, Philip's like, okay, Lord, to buy enough bread for everybody to have just a bite, it would take us, 200 denarii. You know what a denarii is? Basically a day's wages. So we're talking about over half of a year's wages to just be 2/3 of a year's wages to be able to buy everybody enough bread so they could have just a bite. I did a study on this one time. If you bring it into modern day times, it would be like having to bring 18 tractor trailer load, those tractor trailer containers. 18 of those full of bread would only feed enough people to get everybody a little bite. That's what we're talking about. It's just amazing or unbelievable amount of food that it would take to feed these people. So it was definitely a miracle. It was definitely miraculous what Jesus was about to do. But He was the only one who knew what was going on. And God is certainly aware of your needs and your concerns in life today. He is already at work. Sometimes we think that, God doesn't understand what's going on, or He's left me here in this situation and He just doesn't care about me. Especially when we're going through hard times, especially when we're going through difficult times. Sometimes we can get down and discouraged and think, well, God must not realize what's happening, or He's ignoring me, or He's not answering my prayers, or He's not concerned with my concerns, or maybe my needs aren't big enough for Him. We should never think that way, because God is always at work, whether we can see it or not, whether we understand it or not. He's always working, and I believe He's working on our miracle. It's just that we haven't gotten there yet. Jesus already, not only did He know what was going on, He also knew what He was going to do. The Bible says that He asked the question as a test. As He talks to Philip, He asked the question to test him. Now, He already knew what He was going to do. He knew exactly that He would be going to take this little boy's lunch and feed all these people. God doesn't always do exactly what we ask when we ask it, but He does do exactly what we need when we need it. And that's what you have to understand. These guys didn't exactly understand what was going on, but God knew. The grave robber is never too late. Even when we think he is 4 days too late, he's still right on time. Amen? I think sometimes we see more miracles, or we would see more miracles if we learn to just wait and trust God. Now, that doesn't mean that you do nothing, just sit around and wait. Okay, well, Pastor Robbie says I need to sit and wait on the God to do the miracles in my life, so you just sit and do nothing. No, I think we need to keep trusting and keep moving, but eventually you'll catch up to where God is at work, and when you get there, you'll see God make your impossible possible. So, first thing we understand is Jesus is always ahead of us. Second, we learn from this miracle here is Jesus actually chooses to use us or to involve us in the miraculous. This is one of the greatest examples of God using people to do His miracles. Now, God does the miracles. Jesus did the miracle. It wasn't the disciples, and it was all Jesus. It was all about Jesus, but He chose to involve the disciples. He chose to use them, and I think He still chooses to use us today to be an agent of the miraculous. Notice that whenever He used them to bless others. Jesus tells the disciples to have everyone sit down. Now put yourself in their shoes. Jesus has got His disciples out there. Jesus is staying in one spot and He tells the disciples, go tell these people to sit down. Now we know there was 5,000 men, but more than likely it was more than that, because it was probably not just men. It was more than likely, men and women, and perhaps we know it was some children because it was a little boy who offered his lunch up, right? So if you say you had, a man and a woman and some kids, just think it could be anywhere from 18 to 20,000 people we're talking about right here. But regardless if it was 18 or 20 or 25 or 30, 5,000 is what we know it to be. It was still a miracle when you think about it. So Jesus asks them to sit down, or tells the disciples, go have the people sit down. So put yourself in their shoes a minute. Here comes the disciples. They're going around and saying, hey, guys, y'all need to sit down. Let's all sit down here on the grass. Why? Because Jesus said so, okay? We really don't know why, okay? He thinks, I guess he thinks he's going to take this little boy's lunch and feed everybody. I don't understand, but he's fixing to do something. Y'all just need to sit down. And they're having to explain it to everybody who's trying to figure out what's going on, right? Why are we sitting down? When is Jesus going to come? There were people that probably wanted to be healed. There were probably people that wanted to come talk to Jesus, find out something from Him. They were there for various reasons. Maybe they wanted to hear Him teach. Maybe they wanted to hear Him explain some spiritual truth or whatever. They were for all various reasons, but they have to sit down. So they're having everybody sit down. And now after they get them sit down, it was almost as if Jesus is setting the dinner table, but there's no supper, right? It's almost as if Jesus is saying, everybody come to the table, but we have no food. Nobody's cooked. Nobody's prepared anything. But we're all going to come sit down at the table as if we're going to eat. And so they all get to this place. They sit down, and now they get to be a part of the miraculous, because Jesus says, okay, now He takes and He blesses the food, breaks the bread and He blesses it, this little boy's lunch, and He takes it and hands it to the disciples. And they start taking the fragments and the pieces that He's breaking and handing to them. And it was almost as if, remember in the first miracle when Jesus tells the servants to go take the water pots and fill them up with water? It was almost as if you can almost see the disciples getting their basket, that they've got these 12 baskets that they had to start with, right? That Jesus is putting the fragments into, and they put a little piece. He breaks off a piece and puts it in there, and they're all like, "This is ridiculous." I just got I got a tail end of a fish and a little hand piece, no bigger than my palm of my hand of a barley loaf, and He put it in my basket, and I'm supposed to go pass this out. This is going to be a real joke. And they're going to go out here and just start handing it to these people. And so, well, I guess this guy up here on the front row, he's going to get something. I can't say anything. And he reaches in the basket, pulls out some bread. Okay, here you go. Here you go. And it just never runs out. They just keep reaching in and getting more food. And it just keeps getting more. And imagine being a disciple and you're the one passing it out and you're going, how is this possible? It's like the servants when they got the water pot and they took it to the master and he says, this is the best wine. And we're like, we just put water in there. We know how wine is made. It takes years and this is the best stuff. There's no way this is possible. But this is the way maker. This is what God does. This is what The grave robber does. He makes the impossible possible. So they got to be right there and have a front row seat to the miraculous, getting to see people be blessed. Some of the most memorable times in my ministry is when God allowed me or the opportunity to be a blessing to somebody else, to be a part of a miraculous blessing to someone else. It wasn't even helping me. It was just me being a part of it. And God allowed me to be a part of that really made a difference. Whether that be an answered prayer by going and doing something, or praying with somebody and then hearing them testimony of how God answered that prayer, a healing, or maybe somebody had a need provided and I was able to be a part of that by helping provide part of that need, or maybe it's just a simple act of kindness that I was able to participate in and be a blessing to that person. Friends, that's what disciples got to do as a part of this fourth miracle. But not only did they get to be a blessing to others, and God chooses, or Jesus chose to use them, and He chooses to use us to be a blessing to others, but also it was a benefit to themselves. We get to be a benefit of the blessings. We get to be a benefit of the miraculous when God chooses us. In the end, each disciple got to take home a doggy bag, right, of bread back home with them. Because they started off with the 12 baskets, and when it was all said and done, when they went around and collected up all the leftovers, each disciple had a basket full that they were able to take home. I thought that was always interesting, because remember, they were passing it out. They didn't get to eat it. They weren't eating. It wasn't this. Jesus didn't say, okay, disciples, now once y'all pass it out to everybody, then y'all go sit down and y'all have some bread and fish. No, they were just constantly passing out. We're talking about 20,000 people, 12 people serving them. Anybody served that kind of crowd lately? I imagine if we tried the other day, it was just a few of us trying to serve 50 people in here, and it was kind of crazy, wasn't it, Jackson? It was kind of crazy over there. I mean, I was coming up, toast, double bacon, meat. I mean, we were just throwing plates back and forth, and it took 15 minutes or so to serve that little bit of people. Imagine having to serve thousands and just be 12 people going through. And this is what they were doing, and they didn't have time to partake of their food themselves, but yet in the end, God blessed them. Jesus blesses them with allowing them to take a basket home themselves. It's a great reminder that while we're in this process of being used by God, that God will turn around and bless us too. According to verse 14, not only did they get a blessing by taking home physical bread, but also they were blessed spiritually. Verse 14 says their faith increased because these men who saw this sign take place, they believed and it strengthened their faith. They said, this is the prophet. He is the one who has come from above. Each time God shows up and shows off in our lives, our faith grows a little stronger. And that's just one benefit of being a part of the miraculous when God chooses to use us. But I want you to notice finally, Jesus always does more. In God's economy, often things don't add up when you think about it. Remember the children of Israel in the wilderness, their wilderness journeys? They started complaining every day because all they had to eat was manna. Now, imagine that. They were complaining about a miracle in itself. It was something they didn't have to work for. It was something that they had to do was get up every day and it was right there. It was just waiting on them. They didn't have to work for it. They just had to go out and pick it up off the ground. And guess what? They didn't even have to clean up. They got what they needed. They weren't supposed to take any more than what they needed for that day. And then on the sixth day, they were to take a double portion because on the Sabbath, they weren't supposed to collect any. So, and if they did collect more than what they need and tried to keep it for the next day, guess what would happen? It would rot. It would spoil. We get worms and all this kind of stuff. And so God was saying, and they could grind it up, they could pound it, they could make it into bread, they could make it into cakes, they could use it for battering their chicken and their fish and stuff. I don't know if they could use it for that or not, but it sounded good. They had all these things they could do with it, but they started complaining, and it's just human nature. We probably do the same thing. We want to give them a hard time. Well, we would probably do the same thing. We would start complaining about, if we had to eat the same thing over and over again, we would complain too. And so they started complaining about a miracle. They were complaining about a miracle. And then, Moses hears about it, and he prays to God, and he says, these people are wanting meat, and they're tired of eating this manna, and he says, I'm just ready for you just to take me out. Moses was like, just go ahead and kill me, Lord. Just take me out of here. I can't put up with these people. He said, I didn't birth these people. And what do you want me to do? I can't bear them anymore. And God says, okay, I'm going to help you out. We're going to take some people, help you take some of the load off your shoulders. But then he says, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a little respite from this manna. He said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you enough meat, not for one day, not for 2 days, not for just a week, but for a whole month. I'm going to give you enough meat so that everybody in the camp will be able to eat meat for a whole month. And Moses started looking around and saying, okay, where's this going to come from? He said, I don't know where you're going to, this is how this is going to happen. Are you going to have all the fish in the sea come here? Are you going to have, some beasts of the earth? If we went out and killed all the animals we got, we couldn't feed everybody for a month. Everybody in the camp for a month. We're talking about thousands of people. He said, we got 600,000 footmen. And that's not counting the women and children. And we're talking about millions of people. We can't feed all these people. He says, it just doesn't make sense, God. And this is Moses talking to God. You can read it in the book of Numbers. It's interesting that it was in the book of Numbers and the math didn't add up, right? It was the case with Moses. He couldn't figure it out. And so what God did was that the next day, God sent a strong wind, and it forced these quail from the east to come to their camp and fly 2 cubits off the ground, so it's about 3 feet off the ground. It was flying, so they were able to catch them, and by the end of the day, every person in the camp was able to catch enough quail so that they had over 8 bushels of quail each person. That's a lot of quail. It was so many quail, he said, I'm going to cover the earth in about a day's journey in any direction. That's 15 miles in any direction. When you add up the math and you do that, that was 750 square miles of quail that he brought to the camp. Enough for everybody to eat for a month. Don't say that it's something that's too big for God. Don't say that God can't do it. God may be doing or telling you something and realizing you may be thinking to yourself, this is not possible. It can't happen. But you guys will remember, this is God. He is able to do the impossible. He is able to do the things that you and I couldn't even possibly do. Now notice this. When Jesus... Right. Right. Yeah, I said it just a minute ago. I mean, God doesn't always give us exactly what we want when we want it. But He does get us what we need right when we need it. He's always on time. Notice that when Jesus does more, He does more than we remember. Now, this miracle that Jesus did to feeding of the 5,000 wasn't the first time He had done something like this. Because the other Gospels record previously He had fed 4,000 people. And whether the disciples just forgot about that or maybe they didn't put 2 and 2 together, they thought, okay, well, back then He had 7 barley loaves. There was 7 loaves of bread. And there were 1,000 less people. And it was a few fish and not just 2. And so the details weren't quite the same. It was still miraculous, right? It was still amazing what He did. They had already forgotten about it. I want you to think about your life for a minute. How many miracles has Jesus done in your life? Do you know the number? You know, it's interesting. I think And I have to say, even in my own life, in my ministry, and in our church, I think we don't do a well enough job of tracking God's answers to prayer, tracking miracles and what God does. We need to be writing these things down. We need to be tracking them. In your prayer list, and hopefully you have a written prayer list, or you have some notes, or you go through something, how maybe it's in your mind and you got a mind like a steel trap and you always remember stuff. But me, I have to write stuff down, and sometimes even when I write it down, I don't remember it. How about let's write down and start writing down every time God does something miraculous? Because I think sometimes we just forget. We forget, hey, God did something miraculous in my life. God did this. He healed me here. He blessed me here financially. He provided for me here. He brought me through this. He helped me over this, accomplish this. He got this for me in my life. And we see how God did these things, and they're oftentimes miraculous, but how often do we just forget about them? Such was the case with these disciples. They had forgotten, but Jesus was doing more than they would remember. But not only did he more than we remember, we see that Jesus does more than we imagine. I'm sure each of these disciples was trying to figure out how, they were going to be able to feed all these people. But only Andrew and Philip said anything, right? And there were other disciples there, but only these two guys spoke up. Philip said it would take over a half year's wages to buy enough food so that everybody get a bite. And Andrew said, hey, we got this lunch here, these 5 loaves and 2 fish, but there's no way. I mean, there's no way this is going to be able to feed everybody. I wonder how many times we're just like Andrew and Philip. We just can't imagine how we're going to make it out of the mess we're in. How we're going to afford this bill or afford this situation, or how am I going to get through this physical disease or sickness, if I'm going to be healed. How are we going to have this relationship stored, if we're going to make it, if this marriage is going to make it. There just seems to be no way. But we insert Jesus, right? We insert the grave robber. We insert the X factor. We insert the waymaker. And we remember what the Apostle Paul said in Ephesians chapter 3, verse 20. Now to him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think, according to the power that works within us. Have you ever thought about that verse? Listen again. It says, he's able to do exceedingly abundantly above. You know what? There's 3 of the same words saying the same things. When Jesus says the same thing 3 times, or when God tells us the same thing 3 times, he's trying to really enforce it, get our attention. He can do more than we can imagine or think. And it's according to the power that works in us. That same power that did those things back then and fed the 5,000 is the same power that's working in you and I today to do the miraculous in our lives today. This is not some fairy tale. This is not some imaginary world. God is able to do these things in our lives today. We must believe that Jesus can do more. But not only can he do more than we remember or imagine, but he can do more than we can do alone. Disciples have a little boy's lunch, right? And kudos to the little boy. Because basically, he was the only one prepared. He brought food. He brought food on his journey. He had some food. Or at least, if there were other people that had food, they weren't willing to offer it up. Now remember, in that culture and in that time, if you were a child, you pretty much ate last. I remember when I went on a mission trip to Mexico, and over there the folks were always wanting we were their guests. Everywhere we went, they would feed us. We literally would go visit a different part of town where they'd have a different church, and we would sit down, and it didn't matter if we were going there to have a service, or if we were going there just to check out the church, or if we were going there to walk on the beach. They were going to meet us at a house, and we were going to sit down at a table, and we were going to eat. It didn't matter if we'd already ate 7 times. You're going to sit down and you're going to eat again. Because you're coming to our place, we're feeding you. But I remember one time we went, it seemed like every place we went, it would just, all the men, we were, I was with a bunch of men, we would all sit down at the table, and all you would see is men. All you do is see that we would just be eating. The ladies would come serve the food, and then the ladies would be gone. You wouldn't even see them. And then once we were done eating, we would get up, we clean up, put our plates, and then people would come get them. And then we would see the ladies would sit down and eat. And then after the ladies finished eating, then you'd see all the kids would sit down at the table, and the kids would eat last. And I thought, man, that's real kind of like reverse in our society today, because we want to feed them kids first to get them out of our hair, So y'all be quiet. Here, eat something, so you leave me alone so I can enjoy my dinner, right? So we feed the kids first. But back in that culture, maybe it's just a Latin American thing, they fed the men first, women next, and then children. I imagine it was pretty much the similar way here in Eastern culture. They would feed the men first. I mean, the men were the ones counted. It wasn't even the women counted or children enough counted. So when this little boy offered his lunch up, that meant he's not getting anything to eat. Because if anybody's getting something, it's going to be some of them men. And if it was by chance, some of the women might get something left over. But then it would be a long time before he'd be getting anything. And so he was basically saying, take my lunch, I'll go hungry. I'm not going to eat. So, I don't know who this kid is. I don't know what he grew up to be. But I have a feeling he's going to have a special seat at the marriage supper of the Lamb. He's going to get his share of food when it comes time for that dinner. So he gives his lunch, but even that wasn't even an appetizer compared to the number of people. There was no way it could feed them without some type of supernatural intervention. But here's the principle. No matter what you have, God can do more. You give it to Jesus, He will take 2 fish plus 5 loaves and transform that into 20,000 miracles. Because I don't think it was just one miracle. I think it was a miracle for every person that got to eat a meal. Every person that got a bite of food, every person, and not just a bite, but what does the Bible say they got? They got to eat till they were full. They were full and completely full, and there was leftovers. That's where the remainder of 12 comes into place. So in God's math, 2 plus 5 equals 20,000, remainder 12. That's God's math. That's not the new math. That's what happens when the grave robber gets involved. You can bet He can do the same thing for you and I today. Don't cut yourself short and don't think that God can't do it. I don't know where you are on the miraculous barometer in life. Maybe it's raining quail in your life, right? Like it was for those children in Israel. Maybe miracles are a common experience. Or maybe you feel like you're in a dry and thirsty land and maybe you've never really experienced something miraculous. But I want to tell you that same Jesus that fed the 5,000 is the same Jesus that's living in your heart and life today. He's the same one that's working in your life today. And He's still in the business of doing miracles. Maybe we just haven't caught up to where He's working yet. I believe God is always ahead of us at work. And maybe it is that we haven't yet got to that place where God is going to prove Himself faithful and show you that He can do the impossible in your life. Maybe God is choosing to use you to be a miracle for someone else. Maybe the miracle won't be necessarily to benefit you, but you will be a miracle for someone else. And friends, if that is the case, guess what? You're going to benefit either way. It'll be a blessing to be able to help somebody else. Never think that you don't have anything to offer. What if that little boy would have thought that? What if that little boy would have thought, well, this little lunch is not going to, it won't matter. This little bit of food is never going to feed all these people, so I might as well just take it on home. I don't know if the disciples took all those 12 baskets home. One time I preached this, I wonder how many of those baskets that little boy got to take home. Could you imagine that boy got a whole basket of bread to take home to his mama? And he walks in the house with this big old basket of bread and he comes in, Mama, look what I got. And his mama's like, where'd you get that from? You just go out and you rob a bakery or something? No, no, no. Jesus did a miracle. He took my lunch and look what he did with it. He transformed it into this. Brought back a bunch of food for his mama. But this little boy didn't think that. He didn't think it wasn't enough. How often do we think to ourselves, I'm not good enough. God can't do anything with me. What I have to offer is not that important. I'm not very, talented. I'm not very smart. I'm not very gifted. And we might think that we can't offer anything to God. Never think that. No matter how little it is, remember Jesus can do exceedingly, abundantly more than we ask or think. So I want to encourage you to remember that Jesus can still make the impossible possible in your life today. And that is no more clear than we see in the fourth sign. Okay, well, we got 3 more. And by the way, we may even have a bonus tagged on to the end of this. That's found right there in John. And we'll give you extra credit for that one if you Bible students will search out. If you can figure out the rest of the miracles, there's only 3 left, right? So next week, I'll give you extra credit on your test. You didn't know you were going to have a test, did you? So now I've thrown that one out there. I'm going to give you extra credit on your test if you can tell me the 4th miracle, the 3 that remain, plus the bonus one in the end. See if you can figure it out. It's not necessarily recognized as one of the true, one of those miracles according to John. He doesn't call it a sign, but it's miraculous nonetheless, and you should check it out. Hopefully it'll be a blessing to you. We're going to go ahead and go to prayer time and take some prayer requests now at this time. So if you'd like to leave us a prayer request if you're watching online, or if you'd like to leave us a prayer request on our website, we'll certainly be praying for you. But until next time, may the Lord bless you and yours always. All right, I'm going to grab a pen. Here's a pen.